So what we're talking about today is job descriptions. And so before we get to that, I just want to do a recap of how you get to a place where you can start to build your job descriptions. So the first step that we went over in the very first session is building your 4 key functions list. So I'm just going to go back to this view so you can see it all together. So this is the 4 key functions. And a good first step in TouchStone is to start to build out a list of all your processes inside of each of the 4 key functions. So you'd go into each one at a time, build your sub-functions, which are these little black headers here, and then start to list out your processes inside of each of the sub-functions. So think about what are the processes I need and start to list those out. I don't mean to go in and start working on all these tools and the documentation right away. The first step is more just creating this master list. The second step is to go and build your organization chart. So this was last week's section. And the org chart is a picture of the people or the positions in your business. So using the organization chart, you kind of sketch out what is the structure of your business. What departments are you going to have? What positions will you have within each of those departments? Looking into the future, so your future vision for your business and deciding how many salespeople you're going to need or what the structure of the sales department will be. Once you're kind of happy with your organization chart, then it's time to build all the job descriptions. So we've got this master list or this key list of all the processes here. We have the org chart here, which is all the people. And then what happens in TouchStone is we assign the processes from here to boxes on the chart here. So that's how these 2 tools work together inside of TouchStone. Every process that's been listed in the 4 key functions is then assigned to a box on the organization chart, or multiple boxes, because a process can be done by multiple positions sometimes. And that creates what we call a job description. So this is when you click on a box on the chart, it takes you to the job description for that position. And this is what it looks like in the end. So every single one of these processes here is on the 4 functions list in one place or another. So if I selected this daily to-do list, you can see right here from this breadcrumb trail, which goes across the screen, that this is in the doing the business function and it's in the client service sub-function. If I hit the back button here, we go right back to the job description, and this process is linked to the customer service position. So I'm going to go back to the org chart here. First, I just want to talk about the functionality of the job descriptions, what all the sections mean, how to build them, so technically how to do it in TouchStone. And then we're going to kind of end with how to use job descriptions as a management tool. So I'm going to add a position here. I'm going to put in the title, and then I'm going to tell TouchStone where I want it on the org chart. So let's put this under customer service just for fun here and hit save. So now I've got this new position right here. And when I select this position, it takes me to the job description. So this job description is blank because I haven't linked any processes to it yet. I haven't built it yet. First of all, if I want to edit the title of the position, I just click it right here and it opens, and then I can edit or change that title and then hit save. And then this updated title here shows up on the organization chart. So you see it right here. So we're going to click back there. Underneath the title here is what we call the objective. And if you click this objective field, it just opens for you to add the objective. This is usually a sentence or a phrase which describes what the position is here for. What is the result of this position? What's the purpose of it? Why did you hire this position? So it's a high-level sentence which says this is your overall purpose in the organization. So I'm going to save this, and then you see it just appears. So if I go back, I'll just show you an example of an objective. We go to customer service here, Ensure all customers are satisfied with the company's products and services. So it's very high level. I'm not describing work. I'm not giving a list of what they do. This is just the overall purpose of this position. These objectives are good things to really contemplate and think about because it can be the first sentence on an advertisement for that position. Or it can be a grounding sentence, which just reminds that person all the time, what are you here to do? Make sales. Grow the company through generating leads. So don't ignore these because it can be kind of a powerful statement for the employee as well as a way for you to describe what they're there to do. I've also seen these objectives listed like the top 3 results. So in this objective field, you can, do number 1 is this, number 2 is this, number 3 is this. And so these would be the top 3 results or the top 3 goals of the position. And when you save it, the objective field kind of holds the spacing if you want to do it that way too. I wouldn't do more than 3 kind of top results or key purposes or whatever you want to call it. If you do more than that, then you're getting into describing the work that they do. But sometimes people like this because it zeroes them in on, what am I here to do? And they can also be rated against it. So like in a performance review or in a strategy meeting with the employee, you can say, how are you doing on this result and this result and this result? So that's the objective field. The job description has 2 sections to it. There's strategic right here and tactical. So strategic is for high-level work, strategy work, developing things, innovating things, managing other people, so getting results through other people. So it's also management work. So anything that is kind of considered more development, strategic, innovation, getting results through other people, that's how we would define strategic. Tactical is the technical work. It's like the doing it work. So it's very common for a managerial position. I'm just going to go back to the org chart here and show you. It's very common for a managerial position to have a lot of strategic work and maybe just a little bit tactical. So it's common to see something like this. 90% of what they do should be strategic and very little should be tactical. Whereas if it's a non-managerial position like this one, you may have all tactical work and no strategic. Sometimes things that are kind of more focuses of the position, like time management maybe, or anything that you'd consider to be more them working on their position and not necessarily just doing the work, you could put in strategic. But oftentimes I'll see this in tactical positions where there is no strategic processes and there's mostly tactical. When you're building your job descriptions, if it's a managerial position and you're starting to list out a lot of tactical work or link processes from here to a position that's a managerial position and it ends up looking uneven, like you've got a very little strategic and mostly tactical, well, that might be a sign that in your organization chart here, you've got a manager who is not really doing the management work. It's more a glorified technician, we sometimes call it. So there's 2 ways to deal with that. One is you can decide to give that manager the time that they need to really be a manager. Or you can decide that they fill this box, maybe sales lead, and then also the managerial role. So think about, what those positions are, and if they are in fact should be managerial positions that are not really, you're not really giving them the time to truly be managers. Somebody's asking me a question, so I'm just taking a look at it. So he's just asking me to repeat what is strategic and tactical again. So here, we'll go back here. Strategic processes are higher level work. So that's kind of vague, so I'll give you some specifics. It's managerial work, so any work that that position does to manage other people. It's development work, so they're working on something. They're running reports and analyzing something. It's strategy work, so they're evaluating the key indicators of the department, or they're developing a plan or a strategy. Generally, the strategic processes are in the guiding the business function. So right here, guiding the business, I would be safe in saying that every one of these processes, or every one of your processes inside of guiding the business, should be in the strategic work section of any job description. So things around training, employee management, strategic, board processes, higher level work. Tactical is the technical work. I'm going to go back here again. So tactical here is the technical work. So this is mostly done by non-managerial positions. That's a simple, clear way to say it. In our resource center, if you forget later what I said and you're still struggling with it, in the resource center under the knowledge base, I think there's also a dictionary in there. We describe it for you there as well. Okay, so strategic and tactical, the two sections of the job description. Managers mostly do strategic work, and most of the work should be here in a managerial position. Tactical is the technical work, and for managers, there should be less of that. So let's go up here and talk about how to actually build the job descriptions. So once your 4 functions list is done, it's pretty easy to build the job descriptions. Because if I go here where it says add existing process, which means it exists in TouchStone already, that's why it's called existing. I click on this, I'm going to be looking over at the 4 functions list. So that's literally what's happening here. Through this window here, I'm looking over at the 4 functions list. So the first thing I want to decide is this strategic or tactical? It's just going to put it in either one of those sections of the job description. And then when I hit the sub-function drop-down, now I'm seeing all of my sub-functions from the 4 functions list. So when you're doing this for real, you can think about, okay, I'm in the sales and marketing department, and this is a tactical position in sales. So most likely, if I go to sales here, I'm going to see the processes that this position is responsible for. So that's one way to think about it. If it's a managerial position, I would probably start with the strategic, and then in the sub-function drop-down, I'd probably go right to employee management and put in all the processes that this position does as a manager. So I'm seeing all of them here. Then after you've added these, you can go back and say, okay, are there any other strategic things that this position does, or is there any other tactical work that unfortunately that manager does? So once you've gotten to the right sub-function, if you want to add processes, I can click them here and just hit save, and that's going to add just this one. Or I can hold my control key down and I can take multiple processes. Or I can skip one, so I didn't click this one, and add all of these. I think on a Mac it's the shift key, not the control key. And then when I'm happy with what I'm about to add, I just hit save, and then it adds those processes to the job description. So the building of the job descriptions, if you've done your 4 functions list over here, is pretty easy. I mean, it's fast too, because I'm basically just going at existing process and then hit the sub-function drop down, I can look at every sub-function if I want and say, okay, this position doesn't do any of this. Okay, let's go back. Client service, no, they don't do any of that. So you can look through every one if you want to. Or if you're thinking about what the position is, you can probably just go right to the sub-function that pertains to that position and then just add those processes to it. And then you just select, and hit save, or you select and hold your Control or Shift key down and take more, and then just click the Save button. If you've added things to the strategic section and then you look at it and you're like, that's not really right, then you can just drag and drop. So I'm just pulling these. I'm just holding my mouse click down and pulling these up and down to get them from one section to the other. So that's how you link processes from the 4 functions list to the boxes on the chart, which creates this job description. Now, if I select a process like this one here, I can also go to this toolbar item above. So I'm on the process itself, this one called Employee Job Descriptions. And if I go link to job description here, I can see from this tree view what positions this process has been linked to, first of all. So I can see it's on president and it's on this new one that we just added. From this view, I can link and unlink processes as well. So if I want it off this position, I just select this, and then you see it turn gray, which means it's now off of that job description. If I want to add it to a job description, I just click the position. It's asking me strategic or tactical, and then I hit link, and now it's on this position. So once you've built your job descriptions, you can go through and kind of look at every process and make sure it's on the right job descriptions if you want to do that. Or another way to use this link to job description toolbar item is if you add a new process. So if I added a new process to the 4 functions list here, then I might want to go to that process and click link to job description and just link it to the right job descriptions. So this is more about how to, on an ongoing basis, once your initial job descriptions are built, how you can go and just make sure that when you add new things that it gets to be on the appropriate job descriptions. So I'm going to go back here, go back to this one. There's another way to add processes to a job description, and that is by using this toolbar item and adding them directly to the job description. So this add existing process was allowing you to add things that were already on the 4 functions list to the position or to the job description. But if after I've built this job description, if I'm looking at it and saying, oh, this process is missing, and oftentimes that happens because when we're looking at this in a new perspective right now. Before we were just seeing it as lists on the 4 functions by subject area. Here we're looking at this by the position, by the work that this sometimes in your mind person does. So when looking at it from this perspective, you might say, okay, well, this process is missing. So you can go right here to add new process, choose again strategic or tactical, put in the name of the new process. Then you have to tell TouchStone where to put it on the 4 functions list. So even though we're going to add this directly to this job description, TouchStone always keeps the 4 functions list as this master list of everything. So now you're seeing all the sub-functions from the 4 functions list. You want to choose which sub-function to put it in. I just chose this client service, and then you hit save. So now you'll see down below here, and I'll just drag it up to the top so everyone can see it. This process has just been added to this job description. And when I select it here, you can see from the breadcrumb trail right here that it's in the doing the business and the client service subfunction. So either way, you can add existing, which to me makes the most sense because if you build this first, 4 functions, then you build the org chart, then you build all the job descriptions, that's a very comprehensive way of getting everything down inside a TouchStone. But having said that, if you forget a process or you see one is missing at any point in time, you can add it directly to the job description, which also adds it to the 4 functions list. Now, I want to point out one thing about this process I just added. You see underneath, this space is blank, whereas in this employee lateness process, there is what's called the objective to manage and deal with employee lateness. So these are called the objectives of the process. And this is a sentence or a phrase which describes what's the purpose of this process. What is it here to do? What's in it? So when someone looks at that title, employee lateness, if they read the objective, they'll know what's inside of that process. Now, this one's pretty obvious because the title itself kind of says what it is, but not all the processes are that obvious. And it's not always clear when you put those titles in what you meant when you put that in or what was going to be inside of that process. So once you build your job descriptions, you're going to see in a clearer way when you've missed the objectives, because you'll see, like number 1 here, there is no objective, whereas number 2, there is. So when you've built the job descriptions, this is a good time to go back to those processes that are missing objectives, select them, click the objective field, and just put in the purpose right here. We're going to talk more about this next week when we get into the documentation tools. But I just want you to recognize that now, that this is the purpose of the process itself. And when someone's on their job description, if they can see a little bit more description about what is in this process, it's helpful. So let's talk about these 2 icons. First, this is the remove process icon. It's not delete, it's remove. So this is how you get a process off a job description. So if I select this, I'm going to see these little red buttons next to the processes. And if I click remove here, it's going to say, are you sure? You say okay, and now that process is gone. So it's gone from the job description, but it's not gone from TouchStone. If we go back here to the 4 key functions and we go to doing the business, I think this is where I put that process, it's still here, right here. So removing it from the job description takes it off that job description, but does not delete it from TouchStone. The only way to get rid of it in its entirety is to take it and delete it from the job description and then drag it to the delete folder and hit delete, and now it's gone for real. So when you're on your job descriptions, if you see a process that's on there that doesn't need to be on there or shouldn't be on there, then use the remove X to get rid of it. But also remember, if it's something that needs to be deleted in its entirety, you're still going to have to go to the 4 functions and delete it from there. The next icon here is our export icon, and you're going to see this icon all throughout TouchStone, and it means the same thing everywhere you see it. It's basically giving you options to export what's on the screen behind it. So here I can print this job description. If I click print here, it's going to open up my printer settings. And here, sometimes people email the help center and ask, why does it print the web header and different things on the actual document? And that has to do with your printer settings. So if I go to settings here, it's going to allow me to change, how this is set, and then also using the printer system dialog, I can get rid of web addresses and things like that. So that's just print directly. You can also export your job descriptions to Word, which puts them in a writable Word format. PDF. The PDF print is the most polished version of, other than printing it directly, is really the most polished version of a print that you're going to get out of TouchStone and most other things. I can email the job description to someone if I want to. And then it comes down to these 2 last options, which are pretty cool. This is called print the operating manual for the position. So this will print it directly, and this will export it to Word. So what that means is if you use these 2 options, it's going to print, first of all, the job description, which is like a table of contents for the operating manual for that position. So it's going to give your title, what the title is, and then give this list of processes that this position is responsible for. And then it's going to print all the tools inside of every process. So that's what it means by print the operating manual. So all the work plans, checklists, files, forms, all that is going to get printed in order. So everything related to employee lateness first, then performance review. The only thing that TouchStone can't print through this print operating manual is obviously videos, because they can't be printed. It'll show a placeholder for it. And it also cannot print uploaded files because the uploaded files are in different file formats. So some are Word, some are Excel, and there's no way to like launch that and then stick it into the job description, but it will show a placeholder for it. So if you ever need an external operating manual, something in a paper version, this is a quick way to get it through the print operating manual. Now, these print features are important inside of TouchStone because, I totally understand that you want to feel like you can get your stuff out, or there are some people who really need to hold paper in their hands. But I just want to say a few things about that. One of the benefits of TouchStone is that it's a paperless environment. It's in the cloud, like everyone says. So what that means is everything inside a TouchStone is always up to date, and it's the most current version of everything that you have. All of your documentation, your files, your forms, links to things. There is no redundancy with it. I mean, we have backup redundancy, obviously, but there's no duplicates inside of here. TouchStone intentionally stops you from making duplicates. Everything is the most current version. The minute you start exporting things, now you're, by your own doing, creating multiple versions of things. So when I export this operating manual to paper and I hand it to someone, at that exact moment that someone goes in and changes anything, it's now out of date. And this is the downside of papers and binders and even file systems on your computer, because you might think it's cool to email this to someone or to download it to Word and do a save as and put it on your network. Well, it's the same thing as printing off paper, and now it's outdated. Yet it's even more confusing because people are doing save as everywhere. And like, is this the most current version? I had someone in the help center the other day that was saying, well, I've got, two Word files with this work plan on it that somebody emailed to me. And then I went inside a TouchStone. It doesn't look the same as what this Word document is. Well, clearly they don't understand that once you export something, it's exported, but I thought it was kind of a profound moment for that person, because what they were demonstrating to themselves is that by emailing things to each other, now you're working outside of TouchStone, and what's in TouchStone is not updated because now we're emailing this document back and forth to each other. So the answer to that is, don't email things. A better way is, if I want somebody to, like if I did this job description and I wanted to show it to someone else, go to the URL in TouchStone, right click, copy, and I could then put that in an email to them. So I'd open up Gmail, I do left click, paste, go to TouchStone and take a look at this cool job description I made. And then they click that link, and as long as they're logged into TouchStone and they have the right access, they go right to the job description in TouchStone. Same can be true for any documentation that you do. So I could go to this employee lateness work plan here. I could copy the URL right up here, right click, copy. I paste it in an email to my manager and I say, hey, I updated or I created the employee lateness work plan. Take a look at it. So then that manager would go and click the link, and boom, it opens up and right inside a TouchStone, and they're looking at the real document, not a copy of anything. So think about that before you export things. If you're in a company that's got, a lot of document chaos, we call it SOP chaos, which is, your documentation, your communications are all over the place. And people are printing things all the time. TouchStone's an opportunity to kind of move into the new age with paperless environments. And it's just little decisions that you make along the way that can help, the business overall to get more into this, everything's up to date and in the right place. And we're not going to print things anymore. Okay, so that is the basic functionality of a job description. Remember, all of these processes can be moved up and down. They can be moved, from strategic to tactical or reordered in any way on the job description. So let's talk for a minute about how to use a job description. So the first relationship I want to make with the job descriptions and its use is how it's used in TouchStone. So TouchStone in relationship to user access. So inside of TouchStone, people you set up as users, employees in account administration, are assigned positions on the org chart. So if I add a user over here to my user list, an employee, then I would go to that person and I would say, okay, John, what does he do? And I can first go to user access and assign him a position and give him access to it. So that's what I mean by that users are given access by position on the org chart. The control panels are also assigned that way. So user access is what type of access the employee is going to have to this position, read, edit, or create. And then control panel is the same idea, except for you're saying which position does this person fill. So when you give someone access to a position on the organization chart in account administration, that then gives them access to TouchStone. So right now I have access to this position called Manager of Marketing and Sales. And it is the same box that is here on the job description. So in account administration, somebody's gone in and said, yes, she's the Manager of Marketing and Sales, and given me access to that position and a control panel for that position. So what that means is any process I've put on this job description, or somebody has, all of these processes are the processes that I have access to. So if we go back here to the dashboard and I click on this Manager of Marketing and Sales, you see all these processes. These are the same processes that were put on my job description. So when you build those job descriptions and then you assign people to them in account administration, you're giving them access to those processes. So if I log in, if somebody logs into TouchStone and they have access to one position, let's go back here. So let's say it's Mary right here. She logs into TouchStone. She has access to the customer service position. She's only going to be able to see the processes that are on that job description. She's only going to be able to use and access and read, or what you might have given her create access, which means she can build things in processes like work plans and checklists, or she may just have read-only access. But the only thing in TouchStone she can access is going to be that job description and all those processes on that job description. So this is her position. And if we click here, these are all the processes that are in her control panel and all the ones that she has access to. We're going to talk more about that when we get into the account administration webinar, which I think is like in 3 weeks. If that didn't make sense to you and you're still confused by it, you can go to the Resource Center right here. And inside of the User Guides area, there's a whole set of step-by-steps for account administration, all right here, with videos attached to them. So it explains in more detail what I just said, but I wanted everyone to kind of see the relationship between the job description built in TouchStone and how that works on the dashboard, and how it relates to user access. So a job description is, in my opinion, the best management tool that a manager could have. It's an even better management tool when there is documentation behind each of these processes. So when there's a work plan or checklists or forms or videos on how to do customer complaints, that's fantastic. But even if it's just a job description and there is no documentation behind all of these things, or you're working on it slowly, it is still a fantastic management tool. Job descriptions, for the most part that I see out there in the business world, are not built the way that they are inside of TouchStone. Job descriptions I normally see have very qualitative language or subjective their sentences describing things, their hiring requirements, their qualifications for the position. They're basically hiring documents, and they're not real effective management tools to manage an employee on an ongoing basis. They might be great in the beginning when you're going to hire someone, but as far as new employee training and also ongoing management, they're not useful for that at all. And that's why commonly they're just used for hiring, and somebody signs it and boom, that's it. You never see it again. The job descriptions in TouchStone are very practical and clear. They're a list of the work that this person does. And when the rubber meets the road, this is all that's important. If a person knows what they're accountable for, and they know how to do that, and they know what's expected of them, and they know how to get those results, and they're trained in all of that, well, then you have a successful work environment. As a manager, you also have control. You have oversight. You have a very clear picture of what people are supposed to be doing. The chaos diminishes to a certain degree because everything can be related back to a process that somebody is responsible for doing. So how a manager uses a job description is, first of all, for new employee training, which is essential. So this job description literally becomes a list of what I need to train this customer service person in. So after they're hired, they've gone through the HR training, they've gone through the onboarding process. Now we're down to, how do we train them to do what they're meant to do? So this becomes a list that I can go through to train this person in. So the first thing I might train them in is how to do their daily to-do checklist. Then I might decide that the most high-level thing that they do is customer complaints. So I'm going to make that number one, and then we're going to train them in how to do customer complaints. That's the first thing they'll need to learn how to do. Then we're going to train them in production changes. And then I'm going to show them about the one-on-one meetings and when and how and where we have those. And then I'm going to show them about product strategy and design, and then how we do client satisfaction. So this is literally this checklist that I can go through as a manager and check off that this person is learning, or I've taught them what they need to know. Without this, it becomes a person who gets hired in a position, and basically it's just under fire. Like, okay, follow this person around. Watch them do a customer complaint. I want you to, do the customer complaint. Watch him do it for a week and then try to do it yourself. So, you all know what I'm talking about. We call it the tribal method of training, where it's just watch over my shoulder and see how I do it. It's very laborious and riddled with problems and mistakes. And mistakes are a part of learning, but when someone's making mistakes because they weren't trained properly, that's a business mistake. Like, that's a huge managerial error. That's not that employee's fault. So to have a list of what you're supposed to train that person in, and for that person to have a list of what they need to learn, it's a very empowering thing. Then when you add the documentation to it, so not only am I saying you're going to do customer complaints, but here's the step-by-step and everything you need to get to learn how to do that. Now that's real magic there. It's empowering for the employee because they're not furiously taking notes on a sticky pad trying to remember what you said or trying to remember it in their head. And then you're teaching them too many things at one time, and then they go home just feeling completely overwhelmed and stressed out at the end of the day. This gives them guidance. They can look at the work plans. They can memorize the steps. They can see clearly what they're supposed to do. They know that they need to fill out a checklist, which further reinforces the steps of the work plan. Sometimes there are checklists and processes that are just used for new employee training. And then once the person has been there a few months and done this many times, they don't need to do the checklist anymore. So remember that as an effective thing for new employee training. I can take a work plan with one click, and that's what this one is, but with one click here, I can turn it into a checklist. And then I can ask the employee, the first week that you're doing this, go into the dashboard and just check off that you did these steps as you go through it and actually learning it and doing it. Now, they may not need to do that forever, and then you can go in and just delete this checklist if you want to, because once they learn it and they've gotten the steps of it, then they memorize it and they don't need to refer back to it. So the documentation is obviously a great addition, but like I was saying before, just having a list becomes really useful as well. So and another reason why I say that is I think sometimes people TouchStone or processes are built slowly over time. I mean, nobody's going to do this in 2 months. It's a slow, methodical process of getting everything documented over a long time period because everybody's already has a full-time job. So having said that, you can still gain value of the job description in TouchStone even if the documentation isn't done yet, because you can have the employee looking at this and saying, your job is customer complaints. Let's talk about how you get that done. You could even write out steps together as they're learning it. So we call it working on the business and in it at the same time. So in the end, for new employee training, this becomes a list of what this employee has to do. Or learn, I'm sorry. Now on the dashboard functionality, there's even tools in management review here to keep a manager on track with that. So if we go to Mary right here, I'm her manager. That's why you see me above right here, and you see her in management review, because I hold a box above her on the org chart, and I've been made her manager. So if I click on Mary here, let's say Mary has gone into TouchStone and has been learning things that I've asked her to do. For new employee training, this is Mary's control panel here. So even if there are 5 customer service people, whatever we do in here is unique to her. So I could put these processes in order of how I want her to learn them. Inside the control panel here, you can have these groups. That's why it looks a little different than on the job description. It's not just strategic and tactical. I have these little work groups that I've created, which helps to organize the processes. It even shows the public processes. So these are processes on the dashboard that have been made public. So here, these are the things she does daily. This is her client service work. These are the things she does weekly. These are what we call on-demand processes. It means it's not stuff that happens every day or even every week or even every month. These are things that she just needs to have access to when she needs to have access to them. Or when I decide to tell her we need a production change, that may happen once a year. Still, there's a process for it right here. And she knows she can go here and figure out how to do that. Or there's been a workplace safety issue, and so she has to go do that. So I call those on demand. So these are all, drag and drop here too, so I can put them in kind of order of priority, decide what I want her to learn first, second, and third. These I can organize into a priority list as well. And then I can say to Mary, for the first week, I want you to focus on learning how to do your daily to-do checklist and how to do scheduling. So these are the first 2 things I want you to learn. I put these at the top. Then I ask her to go in and read the work plans, watch the videos, study the content, watch me do it, watch 2 other customer service people do it. And I've decided she's going to spend 2 days on this and 1 day on this. So if you're doing this for the first time as a manager with a new employee and using this job description in a sense to do this new employee training, you can guesstimate at how long you think it's going to take her to learn those things. Then after I'm satisfied that she's learned how to do the daily to-do checklist, I can go to that process in management review. First of all, I can make notes inside of it. So these are the notes that were made. How you make a note is you just click the checklist here, and then I can put a note, trained her, or whatever else I want to say, and then I save those notes, and it date and time stamps them. When I'm happy with her training, I can flip this flag, and then these little check marks appear next to the processes. And if I go back here to her overall control panel, you see the little check marks here. So then we focus in on scheduling. I go there. I can make training notes if I want to, just to remind myself of how she was trained, when she was trained. And then when I'm happy that she's been trained in all this, I flip this flag, and then these little check marks appear again. And then if we go back, You see it right here on the overall process. So this is what I mean by it being a checklist. I check her off, I can put in notes, and I mark her as trained in the process, which means that as the manager, I'm taking accountability for this and I'm saying she's been trained in these processes. She's demonstrated to me that she knows how to do this. It doesn't mean she's not going to make mistakes as she goes forward, but we've done our best to thoroughly train her in each of these pieces of what she does. So I'll just go back to the dashboard here. So inside a management review for every employee that you manage, if you're a manager, you can go in and go through this kind of methodical check process. Even if it's an existing employee and the documentation is new because you've never had a job description with a list like this that people are accountable for doing, and this employee may understand how to do all this work already. They may have helped you document it, but you can still practice with those employees. You can say, go through and review the documentation. What do you think? Is this the way you do it? How is this working out? Focus on this for a week and then mark them as trained. So even with existing employees, you can kind of go through this check mark process of making sure that they really understand how to do each of these things. And sometimes that's more important than not, because when there's no documentation, I don't care what anybody says, everybody's doing it a different way to a certain degree. So it's always a good idea to regroup everyone and say, not, I'm going to put the hammer down, now you all have to do it this way. Don't position it like that. Come at the people with, let's decide together the most efficient and effective way of getting this done so that our work flows into other departments in a really clean way. And when we get work from other departments, it flows into us in a really clean way. How should we do it? And then everyone agrees together, and then you get buy-in and sometimes even excitement about things not being so chaotic. So new employee training. I just want to say one more thing about this, and then we'll talk about ongoing training. You can even put a time and a money amount to each of these processes and the training time. And for me, that's an amazing thing to be able to do, because if I need to fire someone because I've been putting up with stuff long enough, or we're growing and I need to hire a new person, if I can, in my budget, say it's going to cost me $20,000 to hire a new customer service person, and I know that because these are all the processes they have to learn, and if I'm assuming a minimum competency level, I think it's going to take them 6 months to learn all this. You have to be realistic about it. Really, how long is it going to take? Then I can safely say my management oversight time and all the training time, this is what it costs us to hire this new employee. Now, that's really valuable information, and it's honest information. It's not just, let's get someone in to help us out because we're all super busy. And then you say to yourself, well, I don't pay anything for training. Yeah, you do. And it's way more than if you would do it this way. So I'm going to go back to the job description here. So again, these are the same processes that we were just looking at over here. They were just organized a little differently. So let's talk about ongoing training, because job descriptions are extremely useful for ongoing training as well. So if you have employees that you're currently managing, either they're doing a really great job at things or an okay job. And in that situation, your job as the manager is to always focus on how it could be better, but also congratulate them on doing a great job. I think we don't think about this very often, but as managers, you want to make your people feel valued. And if they've been doing their daily to-do checklist thoroughly every day, then you need to say something about that. And the job description can help you with that, because if you use it like a to-do list for that employee, I know what they're doing. And so I can clearly not just, hear them say something and go, oh, it was really great how you said that whenever I have the chance. I could think to myself, well, they're handling the customer complaints really well. I'm looking at all their forms they've been doing. I run a report in the dashboard. I see all their checklists. the customers seem happy to me, then I can say to that employee, you're doing a really great job at handling your customer complaints. So the job description puts a lens into what people are doing and then helps you to see how they're rising to the occasion. It also helps when employees aren't doing so well. So all of us have this where you have employees that you wish that they would be better at things. You have varying degrees of that. You have employees who you're just hanging on to them because you just can't stomach the thought of letting them go and then having to deal with hiring someone new and all the training that's involved and what's going to happen. Some of you have employees who they're just not as good as everyone else, and you don't know why. And so there's varying degrees of this. What we tend to do as managers is we blame the employee. And I'm guilty of this as well. They're just not as good as those other people. They don't do this well enough. They're just late all the time. They're messy. Their tone isn't right. They just can't close as good as these other people. They just don't learn things fast enough. So you're blame the employee. Well, I'm here to say that you can't honestly do that unless you've given them thorough training. So the job, or at least told them what they're accountable for in a very clear way. So the job description helps with this because it helps you to kind of see and filter out those annoyances that are every day with what is it that they don't really know, and have you given them the opportunity to learn it? This allows you to see your employees in a new light sometimes. So a manager's job is to manage processes by which the employee gets results. That's how you have confidence as a manager. And the job description is your number one tool for that. If I just had to manage people and I didn't have a process for it, it's a very chaotic way to live. So let me give you an example of an interaction that might happen as a manager. So we're using this job description as a list of things that we're talking about all the time. And so I may meet with my employees one-on-one, or I may be in a performance review with them, and we go through each of these processes throughout the year one at a time, just talking in general about it. So I may say to the employee, let's talk about customer complaints. This is on my list for this month. You're doing great at this. Keep it up. Or I might say, I noticed you on the phone the other day and through this form that you filled out that this just didn't get resolved correctly. I talked to the customer and they said, X, Y, and Z happened. What happened with that? Why didn't you follow the script? Let's talk about the process. Let's look at the process together. Here's where you went wrong. You missed this date. You didn't fill out this form. You didn't call them in time. Let's look at the form. Let's look at the script. Let's talk about it together. What's not working for you about this process? How can we improve it to make it better? Or let's do some role plays and practice what's here so you can get more confident. So you hear how I'm talking, right? I'm saying, what's wrong with the process? What's wrong with the script? Maybe we should practice it. Maybe we should work on it a little more. What happened with this due date? Did you realize it was this time you had to call them within 24 hours? What went wrong with that? There's a much different tone to that. We're blaming the process, or we're blaming the employee's inability to follow the process if they didn't understand it. But I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. And I'm not saying to them, I told you 5 times before, it's right here written out. Why can't you read it? I think you're sloppy. I'm not blaming the employee and making it an attack on them. And the minute you change your tone like that and you have some other avenue to discuss it with them, then that's when your relationship with your employees changes. And that's when the whole business changes because the management's different. We're making this about something concrete and tangible that we can all discuss together and not about blaming people and what they did wrong. So use this kind of technique for ongoing training. So we have 5 minutes left here. I just want to show you some tools in TouchStone already built in the process library that reinforces what I'm saying here about using job descriptions as a management tool. So I'm going to go here to guiding the business. And you can pull these processes down from our library right here, the general process library. What I'm about to show you is all inside of this library. So one-on-one meetings, that's the first thing. Where is the one-on-one meeting? Right here. So this is a process inside the library. This is something that shouldn't be there. I'm just going to delete it. So here, this is a very simple process. This is not a big deal at all. Once a month, once a quarter, once a week, whatever you can muster up, have a one-on-one meeting with your employees. Sit down with them, even if it's 30 minutes, 20 minutes, even if it's on a tailgate in a work yard. You can have TouchStone, the dashboard, open on your phone to do this. So don't make the I don't have time in a place an excuse. This can happen anywhere. Sit with them one-on-one, look them in the eyes once a month, once a quarter, whatever you can do, and talk about how their job is going. Use the job description as a way to talk about it. How's the customer complaints process going? Oh, it's not documented yet. We really need to work on that. What can we add to it? Just go through each of the processes and talk about how they're doing. There's a little custom meeting agenda form in here for this inside of TouchStone that you can use on the dashboard. So this is a way for a manager to kind of plan out what are the items to discuss, what are the goals from last time, what are any problems you want to resolve, and you can look at the job description. You can say we need to work on this, this, and this. You list these things out, and then you discuss it with them. So do this at least once a quarter, 4 times a year. It doesn't take that much time, especially when you have, a step-by-step for it. There's a simple form. If you're a manager of managers, insist that your managers do this. This is like a quality assurance thing for employees that goes miles, way past what you would think the result would be. So that's the one-on-one meeting process. The second is performance review. So here in TouchStone, we have like a 60-day review, which is good for new employees. And then we just have ongoing performance review. So what the performance review is it's the job description. That's all it is. So we have a custom form for it right here. I'll show you it as a document. So this is it. It has a little rating system. These are all the processes from the job description. That's all they are. It even says right here, from job description. So this person has to handle requests for information. So I'm basically rating that employee on every process on their job description. I'm giving you a grade and putting in comments. And then you might have other things like initiative and dependability and stuff like that. But basically, this is reinforcing the job description, and it's reviewing them in a very tangible way. If I've been doing one-on-one meetings all throughout the year, and we've been focusing on processes on that job description, the rudimentary work, if I double down on this and do a performance review for them with the same processes, it's very reassuring for that employee because they clearly see what they're being evaluated on. And it's so easy for management. If I couldn't do performance reviews this way, and obviously there's been times in my life where I haven't been able to, a performance review for a manager who cares is a very can be an overwhelming, frustrating thing, especially when you manage a lot of people. Because what you're really having to do, let's be honest, is you're just kind of making it up sometimes. I got to sit at the end of the year and remember everything they did that year. For the bad employees, it might be a little bit easier, but this comment section is where you're a fraud because you give them a grade and then you're just going to say, oh, yeah, you're great at that. Or, oh, it's just you have to make it up. It's very difficult. So if you're doing this based on this TouchStone system of one-on-one meetings based on the performance review, based on the job description, even before that, they were trained in the job description, new employee training on the job description, then one-on-one meetings on the job description, then performance review on the job description. There's going to be no surprises here. They're going to know exactly what you're going to say, and they're going to know how they need to get better and what they need to do to get better. And you're going to know exactly what to say. So remember those two processes inside of the library, one-on-one meeting and then also performance review. Next week, we're almost out of time, but I'll just highlight next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about the process tools page, how to document a process. So right here, we're going to start with work plans and checklists, and then the following week, we're going to cover the rest of the tools. But in the next two sessions, we're going to talk really thoroughly and comprehensively about how to use the technology, or technically how to use these tools and what they're for. But then I'm going to show what's a great work plan, how to document a great work plan, what a bad one looks like, how to fix them, how to make them the best training tools possible. So if you have any employees in your company that you think would be helpful in allowing them to or asking them to help you with the documentation, the next two sessions would be great sessions for them to attend, because they don't need to know everything about TouchStone. They really only need to know how to get to this screen and how to really thoroughly document a good work plan and how to use these other tools when they're needed. So that will all be next week. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye-bye.